Marcus Venezuela. Sorry, say that again? I'm going over to FM1 because I can't understand you. Your radio's overmodulated. Sorry. Going to FM1. Hello, hello. Go ahead. Yes. Where's 10? All right, can we go that way just a little bit? They're apparently showing a triage area. I don't know. Oh, look at. Yeah. That's good. We're good. There you go. Thank you, Stan. Broward 70. B8. B8 is where they appear to be gathering, or at least some folks are gathering. Okay, well, we got the one on the tarmac, and we got a corner of one getting put in the back of rescue while we were doing all that live stuff, so we'll see if any more come out of it. right, mark your time code. Here comes one in the wheelchair. One in the wheelchair now. Or not. I don't know what that is. Yeah, person in the wheelchair. What did he say? What did he say? No, I did not. I'm joking. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
In New Hampshire, and give our students the opportunity to ask questions to the candidates. This is part of a three-pronged effort we have, touching the future, and we have the unique opportunity of the 100th anniversary of the New Hampshire primary to have our students engaged in the civic process and the democratic process to come prepared to ask questions to the candidates. We also have Granite State conversations. We have conversations about important substantive issues of the day, and New Hampshire civics classes at our 7 community colleges tied to the primary. We had a Granite State conversation with retired Justice David Souter and with Senator Gregg on Monday in Nashua, where we talked about the importance of civics education. Our students here learn about civics and the importance of engagement in the political process through asking questions to the candidates. We greatly appreciate Secretary Clinton coming here today. Our students here at our community college at White Mountains and across our colleges in New Hampshire are representative of the over 10 million students at community colleges across the country. That's about 45% of all college students across the country, and actually 50% of students who end up with a bachelor's degree started at a community college. Here at White Mountains Community College, we have about 1,000 students, and we have 27,000 students across our system. So I truly thank Secretary Clinton for joining us and allowing our students to engage in the political process with her. And with that, I'm very happy to introduce our president here, Matt Wood.
Thank you, Ross. As many of the people that know me here in my community, I don't like to use notes, but I have one note card for the end because I want to make sure I get a quote correct. We are so very lucky to have Secretary Clinton come to this community. As you all know, Berlin has struggled in an economic downturn for some time now, and when a candidate of Secretary Clinton's stature takes the time to come and show us that she's willing to fight for us, I think that's pretty special. So I really appreciate that. So as Ross mentioned, this is about civic engagement. And in this exercise, we want our students in our community to get engaged in politics. And I know as a citizen, we get caught up in the rhetoric and we hear things in the media, but I can't tell you as an educator how important it is to stay engaged. I remember one of my very first engagements was the election between Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford. And why did I stumble? Some of you are probably skeptically saying, there's no way he was that old. Well, I wasn't. My kindergarten teacher, Janet Utes, arranged a mock ballot, and she had ballots for us, and she had a voting booth, and she had a ballot box. And I remember her coming to the classroom every morning through the month of October to read to us from the local media because there was no internet at that time, and we got to vote. And I remember that as being very special, even though I was only 5. And to this day, I take it upon myself as an educator and as somebody that is a member of society that voting is important. These folks fight for us. And I don't want anyone in the room to ever forget that, you know, there are people at the top. We feel like we're out of touch with Washington, but there are people that care about us. And one of those people is here with us today. So Secretary Clinton is no stranger to being an advocate to education. When she was First Lady in Arkansas, she fought and advocated for early childhood education. She has spent her entire adult career advocating for women, children, and families. And I think that that's just about the cornerstone of America. This summer, I read in the paper that she announced the College Compact, which is aimed at keeping costs down for college students and making sure debt doesn't get in the way of student achievement. As the father of a freshman that chose an out-of-state college, I truly appreciate that at this time. As I introduce the secretary, which she will be making some remarks about her priorities and her background, and taking student questions and then taking questions from the public, I want to leave you with a thought, and this is where the card comes in. This thought came from a graduating student at a college just outside of Boston just a couple of years ago. And I quote, "The challenge now is to practice politics as the art of making what appears to be impossible, possible." So think about that for a minute. I know as an educator, I come to school every day trying to make the impossible possible. And I know that this candidate does the same thing, because those were her words at her own graduation from Wellesley College. So it is with great pleasure and privilege that I introduce Secretary Hillary Clinton.
Thank you so much. That's great. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you all. Wow. Thank you. I am thrilled to be back here in Berlin and to be back in the North Country. I want to thank the Chancellor. He and I have encountered each other at community colleges around New Hampshire. He knows that I'm a huge supporter and advocate for community colleges. And Matt, thank you. Thank you for your leadership here at White Mountains and your lifetime of dedication to education. I'm delighted that the mayor is with us. Mayor Grenier, thank you so much for joining us. Senator Woodburn, Senator Hosmer, thank you both for being with us as well. And to the students and faculty and staff of the college and to everyone gathered here, I am really looking forward to our conversation. I appreciated very much what Ross said about the need for greater discussion, civic involvement, the importance of gathering in places like this to talk about the issues, to hear what's on your mind, to ask me questions about what I would do in response to your concerns. And I appreciated Matt's very strong statement about the importance of voting. That shouldn't have to be mentioned, but indeed it does, because we still have too many of our fellow Americans who just don't think it's worth it, don't think anything will change. And what that really means is you leave the voting to others whether you agree with them or not. Those who show up, that's who's going to pick our leaders, that's who's going to help set the direction of our country. And I am an absolute fanatic about trying to get people to vote. Obviously, I'd love for you to vote for me, but equally, if not more importantly, you need to vote. And so I hope that these series of conversations that you've been having across the state will encourage and entice more people, particularly young people. Because as I take their questions in a minute, I want them to know this election's far more about your future than it is about many of us who are here. I want you to understand that many of the decisions that are going to be made by the next president will have a direct impact on the quality of your lives, your economic life, your social life, the standing of our country, the leadership of our nation in the world. I don't know if did any of you see the Republican debate last night? Yeah. You know, I watched it. And I was waiting for the discussion to turn to what people talk to me about. As I've traveled across New Hampshire, how are we going to get wages rising for the middle class and hardworking Americans again? How are we going to help communities like Berlin that help to build the United States of America have an economic revival so that the people who live here will once again have a positive future staying right here at home? How are we going to make college affordable? How are we going to pay down the debt that is strangling so many of our young people? They get out of college and then they have to worry about how to pay for it. Going to college should not be primarily about how you pay for going to college. That should not be the hardest thing you face. How are we as a nation going to create more good-paying jobs? I had a great conversation a few minutes ago with the mayor about the way that this community is trying to reinvent itself through energy production. But you can't do it on your own. You need a partner in Washington. You need somebody who's actually going to talk with you, listen to you, and then roll up her sleeves and get to work for you. So I didn't hear much about any of that last night. I heard a lot of insults and a lot of, back and forth between the various candidates. You would have been better off watching the World Series because the debate, in my view, was a swing and a miss and didn't really further the national conversation that we need to be having with each other. On the way here this morning, I stopped in Gorham to have a cup of coffee, and I was dealing with, the need for caffeine, which is a constant need on the campaign trail. And in the White Mountain Cafe, I got into a conversation with some of the people there. And to me, that's what politics should be about. A woman started it by saying she was a retired school nurse. She wanted to talk about her 20 years of taking care of kids in this area. Then a teacher joined and said she wanted to talk about the kind of support teachers need from communities and from families in order to do the best job they can do to help prepare our kids. And then an early childhood educator, came into the conversation saying, we got to do more to help, kids get off to a good start. And pretty soon we were having this really great conversation about what we can do to help everybody live up to his or her God-given potential. That is my mission in running for this job, and it will be my mission every single day as your president. Because I know from my own life that America holds out such promise, but people oftentimes need some help getting on that first rung of the ladder, and communities that go through changes need that help too. I'm the granddaughter of a factory worker. My grandfather came as an immigrant to this country with his family when he was a little boy, went to work in the Scranton lace mills. Pennsylvania, New York, New England, the Midwest, they were filled with mills like the paper mills that used to make a good living here in this part of the country. He worked hard, and he did it not only to support his family because he believed that his sons would have a better life if he did that, and he was right. Each of his sons ended up going to college. My father, then in the midst of the Depression, graduated from college, couldn't find a job anywhere, literally hopped a freight train from Scranton to Chicago because he'd heard from a friend of a friend that there was a job there. And he got a job as a salesman. And he did that for a number of years until he joined the Navy during World War II, served as a chief petty officer, training young men to go off and fight in the Pacific. And then when he got out, he started a small business, and it was a really small business, printing drapery fabrics. And the only people who helped him besides my mother and me and my brothers from time to time were day laborers, because that's how small it was. But it made enough money for a good, solid, middle-class life. And now I'm standing here in front of you, third generation, asking for your support to become president. That's the America I grew up in. That's the America my grandfather and his family immigrated to. That's the America my father believed in with all his heart. And I want to make sure every person, but particularly every young person in our country, has the same opportunities. I'm a new grandmother, 13 months now. And yeah, that's applause from all of us in the Grandparent Club. I'll tell you, I'd always heard about how great it was, but until it happens to you, it's pretty hard to explain. And there's something about it that it really grounds you in the present. Bill and I spend our time just looking at this little miracle of a person, and whatever she does, we're just in awe. I joke and say she learned to clap her hands, and we gave her a standing ovation, but it's just every day is like that. And we're going to do everything we can to help her have whatever opportunities she possibly can in life. But that is not enough. See, I just was raised by my family and my faith, by my teachers, to believe that we had such a blessing in this country. And it was up to each and every one of us in our own ways to figure out how we were going to pass it on. So what kind of country will my granddaughter become an adult in, and what kind of world is going to be waiting out there for her? See, I don't think it's enough that the granddaughter of a former president can have a lot of opportunities in America today. I want the granddaughters of factory workers and the grandsons of truck drivers, the children and grandchildren of everybody in this room and everybody across our country to have the same chance to make the most out of his or her God-given potential. That's what my campaign, when you strip it all away, is about. That's what I'm going to fight for every single day, fighting for you, fighting for families, fighting for the kind of future that I think we deserve and that we can have again. So with that, I want to turn to questions, and I'm going to start with students, and then we'll go, when the students are finished, we'll go to others. So I see some students in the front row. They've got what look to be like very long, probably complex and difficult questions, all written out and ready to go. So please introduce yourself, and if you're a student, please say what you're studying here at the college.
Hi, I would officially like to welcome you to WMCC from the student body. My name is Dawn Shalou. I'm in the nursing program here at White Mountains Community College, and I actually live in Berlin, New Hampshire. And my question is, per capita, healthcare in the United States costs about twice as much as it does in other developed countries. What is to blame for this, and what do you plan to do?
Great question, and thank you for studying to become a nurse. We need more nurses. We're going to have a lot of retirements in the next decade, and so we need more young people like you entering nursing. This is a very important question, and there are a number of different reasons for why our costs are higher than others in comparable economies. Compare us to advanced economies, Canada, Europe, Japan, places like that. And here among the reasons are the following. Number one, we have a system that we inherited from World War II, an insurance-based system, a private insurance-based system. And it was created back in the 1940s as a way to entice people to come to work for employers because many people were obviously in the military, and yet the rest of the country's economy had to operate. And it continued after World War II, and it became the basis for employer-based health care, so that most people got their health care then, as well as now, through their workplace. Now, that worked okay, but it left out a lot of people. It left out retired people, which is why we passed Medicare in the 1960s. It left out poor people who either weren't working or whose job did not offer insurance, which was the majority of them. That's why we passed Medicaid. So we developed a hybrid combined system, employer-based health care, Medicare and Medicaid, and of course veterans through the VA, and active duty service members through Defense Department provided health insurance. So those were the big pieces of our healthcare system. What began to happen is that the administrative costs in our private system that was based on private insurance add a layer of expenses that you will not find in Medicare. You know, when people attack Medicare, listen carefully to Republicans who are always attacking Medicare. They want to privatize it. They want to end it. Some of them have been against it for 50 years. The administrative costs of Medicare are very low. The administrative costs of private employer-based health care are higher. And we also had the benefits, but some of the cost challenges of having the most sophisticated advanced medical care anywhere in the world. You know, we have a series of research hospitals that provide care not only to Americans, but people leave countries like the ones that have only a single system and come because of the high quality of care. You know that. People in New Hampshire go to Boston sometimes for advanced treatment. Dana-Farber is a world-renowned cancer center. So we have the best of the best, and that also is expensive, and that adds costs. So, for example, Medicare pays to train specialists, and those specialists are trained at a lot of these research hospitals. So then the cost of getting care at those hospitals includes the cost of training the next generation of specialists. So we have a very complicated, comprehensive healthcare system. I think it's fair to say that we get some of the best results in the world, but we don't get the kind of steady level of good results for everybody that we should be looking for. I mean, if you have an advanced form of cancer, there's no doubt you should be in one of our great cancer facilities. If you have diabetes and you need to be treated and you need to be checked on all the time, that might be more expensive. So part of what we have tried to do, you know, I worked on this back in the 90s. I still have the scars to show for it, taking on the insurance companies and the drug companies, because I think it's wrong that the insurance companies are still, in my view, charging too much for the delivery of health care. And I think our drug companies, which have produced great drugs over a long time, are now, once again, charging way too much and need to be reined in. So although we weren't successful in the 90s, we had the beginning of a great debate, and I really give President Obama a lot of credit for getting the Affordable Care Act passed. And what the Affordable Care Act is trying to do is not only get more people to have insurance and expand Medicaid so that more working people who don't have it through their employer and can't afford it, buying it directly, even with subsidies, get care. What the Affordable Care Act is trying to do is to squeeze out the unnecessary costs. So, for example, there's a new rule in the Affordable Care Act which says insurance companies have to spend a high percentage of their dollars from people like us actually trying to improve and streamline care, not putting it into administration and profit. So we're trying to attack some of the higher cost drivers. Now here's what I want to do. I want to get the out-of-pocket costs that people are paying on their insurance policies down because they're too high. There's too many high deductibles, and there are too many other costs that the insurance companies are putting on consumers. So for example, I think every person with a private insurance plan should be able to have 3 sick visits for free instead of paying or postponing going because you have to pay for a sick visit. I also believe we've got to rein in the drug companies, and I'm already in another argument with them about this, because here's the problem. I, like all of you, am grateful for the discoveries, but the drug companies spend less today on research than they spend on advertising. I don't know about you, but I tell you, these TV advertisements, you know what I'm talking about, the ones that are They all look the same. I mean, happy people running through fields of wildflowers. And it's advertising some drug. But then below, in a really low voice, it's like, if you take this drug, terrible things will happen to you, and all the rest of it. I mean, I don't think that they should be able to, what's called in the tax system, expense those drug advertisements. And I think there ought to be more accountability so that they're not selling you a bill of goods. And so, number one, they shouldn't be able to deduct the costs. I want them spending money on research, not on advertising. And number two, the FDA should have to review those ads to make sure that the information is correct, because people, are relying on that information, sometimes to their detriment. Secondly, you're up here in the North Country. You can cross the border into Canada and buy the same American drugs for less over the border than you can buy them right here in New Hampshire. When I represented New York, all along the northern border with Canada, buses would go over into Canada and people would be buying their drugs from Canadian pharmacies. Why? Because drug companies negotiate for lower prices, and this also is part of the answer to your question. If you are in Canada or Europe or Japan, an American drug company has to negotiate how much it's going to get paid for that drug. So here's the United States. We've helped to support the research. The NIH and great research institutions that are funded in large measure by the American taxpayer. We then fund the FDA to provide the testing to make sure it's safe. And then we end up paying the highest prices after we've already put the money in. And so far, the drug companies have been successful in avoiding having to negotiate with Medicare for lower prices. That has to change. It's one of my highest priorities because it will help get the cost of health care down. So, I mean, really, I could go on and on. I don't want to bore you with all of our healthcare challenges, but we've got opportunities here because more people are paying attention to what it really costs, and we need to really get behind making some of the changes that will keep the best of our healthcare system. And many people with private health insurance, employer-based health insurance, don't want it to change. They like it. We have to protect Medicare, and we have to get costs, out-of-pocket costs, and drug costs down. Then we'll be more in line with what we're trying to achieve through the Affordable Care Act. So even though we will probably still be above other countries on a per capita basis or an overall amount, we will be moving in the right direction. That's what I want to see happen. So this young man right there.
My name is Chris Blair, and I'm going into IT and computer science. Our nation's jail population is growing at an alarming rate, and we have the highest incarceration of inmates in the world, many from minor offenses such as drug possession. Shouldn't we be focusing more on their rehabilitation back into society or into the outside world so they can eventually give back to society?
Answer is yes. And the gentleman is absolutely right. We have 5% of the world's population. We have 25% of the incarceration population. There are a lot of reasons for that. But now we've got to revisit how we run a correction system that really doesn't keep taking in people for low-level offenses, people who need treatment for their drug addiction or their alcohol addiction, as opposed to being thrown in jail where that's likely to get worse. And I think there are some very good ideas. And in fact, this is one of the areas. Hallelujah. This is one of the areas where we have a bipartisan group of senators working on it together. And they are coming out with some specific recommendations about how to bring back more of a rational approach toward our criminal justice system and the incarceration system. Some of the best work that I've heard about and I've seen in law enforcement when it comes to drugs, because that's one of the biggest drivers of the incarceration population, is actually going on right here in New Hampshire. I did a whole town hall on substance abuse in Laconia, and we featured the police chief and a police officer who 100% now is spending his time trying to intervene with addicts to get them into treatment, get them off the streets, prevent them from, robbing or committing some other crime to get money for their addiction. And I'm really impressed by that. The governor of Vermont, Governor Shumlin, who's endorsed me, was actually in the town hall. And Vermont is taking a lot of steps to try to deal with the heroin epidemic and the opiate epidemic. So we've got to tackle this on several levels, but your point of your question is absolutely right. We incarcerate too many people. We need to figure out how to have more diversionary programs for those who deserve it and who deserve an immediate second chance.